You can feel it already. There's a difference between pushing reality and letting it respond. One is strain, the other is signal. The difference lives in your nervous system long before it shows up in your inbox. From the inside out, notice how control speaks. It makes lists that multiply. It tracks every variable, then invents new ones. It refreshes the page, not because anything changed, but because uncertainty feels unbearable for another second. Control is not the villain. It's a bodyguard that never learned off duty. It stands at the door with a flashlight, waving even when the hallway is empty. It wants you safe. It doesn't know that safety also arrives through trust. Here's the pivot you've been sensing. Trust is not pretending things will work. Trust is releasing the assignment to micromanage routes you cannot see. It is permission, not passivity. It turns your attention from contingency to coherence. Coherence sounds quiet. It isn't sleepy. It's tuned, like a string right before the downbeat. You breathe once, deeper than usual. Your shoulders drop by a finger's width. Your eyes soften toward the edges of the room. That small reset changes the math. When you ease out of outcome grip, the field stops echoing your static. Messages land because you aren't talking over them. The call returns because your energy no longer reads as demand. Shift from idea to embodiment. Pick one moment today where your habit is to tighten. Maybe it's the unreturned message. Maybe it's the number in your banking app. For 60 seconds, move nothing except your breath. Inhale through your nose for 4, hold for 2, exhale for 6. Let your jaw unclench without forcing it open. Let your eyes widen as if you're taking in a landscape. Now widen the lens. Ask one question that control never asks. What can work here without me forcing it? Don't hunt for the answer. Let it arrive like a bird that lands when the feeder is still. The signal will often come sideways. A name you didn't expect resurfaces. A street you never take opens. A line in a book you meant to return starts glowing. Coherence makes room for non-obvious routes to present themselves. Translate this into choices. When a route appears, pick the smallest action that maintains ease. Send the text without the second paragraph. Place the call without the speech. Draft the email and leave the pitch line out. Your job is not to throttle outcomes. Your job is to keep the channel clean enough for routes to reveal themselves. Control craves guarantees before it moves. Trust moves. Then lets evidence accumulate. Let's test it in the small. If a package is late, try coherence first. Breathe, release the timeline story, then check tracking once. If action is needed, you'll feel a simple nudge. If not, you'll feel the absence of urgency. You are not becoming passive. You are upgrading from noise to navigation. The bodyguard still works, but under a new captain, control becomes a skill you use, not a climate you live inside. When the field includes others, this shift gets loud. People stop mirroring your tension. Conversations move from defense to discovery. You stop stacking backup plans in your throat. You begin asking better questions with fewer words. Signal has manners. It knocks instead of pounding. It holds the door for timing. It notices the rhythm of rooms and steps into the gaps. That's why outcomes feel like coincidences. They aren't. They're choreography you finally hear. From the inside out, keep watching your tells. Short breath is noise. Scanning the room for threats is noise. Rehearsing tomorrow's argument is noise. Each time, return to the single move that opens. Everything soften and ask, what can work without force? You'll start collecting receipts. A reply arrives the moment you stop refreshing. The elevator door opens when you stop jabbing the button. The exact sentence you needed shows up in a stranger's mouth. You didn't conjure it. You got out of its way. There will be days when control shouts again. That's fine. You will not argue with it. You will thank it for its service and give it a smaller job. Count the cash, not the chances. Polish the shoes, not the story. Trust is not a personality trait. It's a practice of reducing static. Every reduction multiplies signal. Every bit of signal reconfigures roots. Outcomes begin to look like a world conspiring, not resisting. Finally, stand at the doorway. One hand holds your plans, the other releases their grip on how. You step when the click inside says yes. You pause when the quiet says wait. You stop treating silence as punishment and start hearing it as tuning. This is where weird begins to look ordinary. The right person texts during the breath you almost skipped. The spot opens just as you turn the wheel. The meeting moves to the one day your calendar could stretch. You did not summon miracles. You removed the foghorn that drowned them. You let the orchestra tune, then took your seat. Baton raised, first note shimmering. The same life, now in signal. You've already seen glimpses of it. A day that evaporates in what feels like an hour, or a conversation that stretches time so wide you forget the clock exists. Time itself doesn't move differently, but your relationship to it does. When trust leads, time bends. When control leads, time resists. From the inside out, notice how minutes behave under stress. They crawl, heavy with static. Each second ticks like dripping water in a cave. You feel trapped, waiting for release. But in coherence, minutes expand into canvases. They hold more color, more detail. They stretch without strain. Here's the pivot you've been sensing. Linear time isn't the only option. You don't have to abandon schedules, but you can loosen your allegiance to the clock. Trust lets you partner with rhythms that clocks can't measure. Some call it subjective time. Others name it kairos, the moment that feels appointed, not measured. Now widen the lens. Think of time as a braided river. One channel runs fast and narrow, cutting hard against its banks. Another meanders, wide and slow, carrying silt that nourishes the floodplain. You've been taught to stay only in the fast current, mistaking velocity for progress. Trust allows you to drift into the wider channels when needed. Shift from idea to embodiment. Try this for one day. Stop measuring only by hours. Instead, note 3 timing qualities. Compression when things happen faster than the effort explains. Dilation when experiences feel rich and full, beyond the minutes they occupy. Alignment when tasks land in perfect sequence, as if prearranged. Write them down. You'll notice patterns that defy clock logic. Let's test it in the small. A train delay frustrates most people. You can read it differently. Maybe that delay compresses later events someone you needed to meet. Boards only because of the holdup. Or dilation, the delay becomes the pocket of space where a solution drops in. Alignment, the delay places you in the right conversation at the right station. From the inside out. Watch your body cues. Tension in the jaw usually signals you're fighting time. Shallow breath is another tell. In those moments, soften. Ask, is this a compression window, a dilation pocket, or an alignment shuffle? Reframing time this way transforms panic into curiosity. Here's where it gets weirder. When you align with trust, your nervous system broadcasts coherence that others unconsciously sync to. Meetings end early because energy flows smoothly. Conversations land in fewer words. Events cluster into efficient spirals. It feels like you stretched a day without lifting more weight. Translate this into choices. Rather than pushing to fill every slot, Leave intentional blank space. Call it elastic buffer. It isn't wasted time, it's fertile ground where timing intelligence can plant solutions. Many of the most precise synchronicities land in those spaces you left unguarded. When the field includes others, timing becomes contagious. Groups breathe easier when someone anchors elasticity. You've probably seen this one calm person keeps a room from fracturing under deadline stress. That person is acting as a tuning fork for time. You can become that anchor without even speaking. Now widen the lens again. Consider history. Major breakthroughs often arrive too early or too late by conventional timelines. Yet when the world was ready, those ideas snapped into place. The same applies to your projects. Some seeds sprout quickly, others must rest through seasons before emerging. Trust reads both as valid. From the inside out, practice micro-surrenders. Instead of forcing outcomes to land on your schedule, set a container. Say, this week is open for alignment. Then watch how opportunities cluster into days you never could have arranged. That clustering is evidence of timing intelligence responding to your openness. Finally, stand at the doorway. Linear time still ticks, but you're no longer hostage. You hold the clock in one hand and rhythm in the other. Some tasks demand the schedule's blade. Others thrive in the river's flow. Your mastery is not choosing one over the other. It's knowing which current to ride and when to switch. Elastic time doesn't make you immortal. It makes you intimate with life. It lets you taste hours as whole meals, not scraps. It lets you compress weeks into a single yes that reshapes your path. It makes time your collaborator rather than your captor. This is why trust matters. Only when you stop wrestling the second hand does the hourglass reveal it was always porous, always pliable, always waiting for you to play. You don't escape time. You discover its flexibility, hidden in plain sight, unlocked by coherence. Before you can bend probabilities or sense synchronicities, your body has to come along. You can't skip it. If your nervous system is still braced for impact, no philosophy will stick. Trust has to be cellular before it can be cosmic. From the inside out, notice what vigilance feels like. Shoulders raised, half an inch too high. Breath snagged in the chest instead of dropping low. Eyes darting, scanning for exits even in safe rooms. This is survival mode, the default many carry without realizing. It keeps you ready, but it also keeps you noisy. Here's the pivot you've been sensing. Coherence begins when vigilance takes its first break. Not total shutdown, not collapse. Just a pause long enough for your body to remember it's not always under siege. In those pauses, trust finds room to root. Shift from idea to embodiment. Try this right now. Place your hand on your sternum. Feel its rise and fall. Let your exhale lengthen by one beat. Not two, not three, just one. Notice how the body responds when pressure loosens slightly. Often, the jaw slackens. The tongue softens. Vision widens. These are somatic markers of coherence. Now widen the lens. Imagine your nervous system as an instrument in an orchestra. When it's out of tune, it doesn't just affect you, it makes the whole room dissonant. But when you strike coherence, others pick it up like resonance. People breathe easier near you without knowing why. Let's test it in the small. Next time you walk into a tense meeting, do nothing outwardly. Just anchor breath in your belly and drop your shoulders. Watch how tone shifts. Someone cracks a joke who never does. The tempo softens. This isn't mystical influence, it's coherence spreading by proximity. From the inside out, you'll notice coherence shows up as warmth in the hands, clarity in the eyes, and steadiness in the voice. You don't have to force any of it. The body knows how. Your only job is to reduce interference, unclench, exhale, trust the intelligence beneath habit. Translate this into choices, build micro-practices, 2 deep breaths before opening email, 1 shoulder roll before making a call, a 30-second gaze out the window before answering a tough question. These aren't time wasters, they're resets that let trust, not static, lead the action. Here's the secret: many miss coherence doesn't mean calm all the time. It means capacity to return to center quickly. Even athletes in peak flow spike their nervous systems. Then release. It's the rebound, not the absence of intensity, that marks trust at work in the body. When the field includes others, your coherence often becomes invisible leadership. Kids settle faster around you. Strangers share more openly. Colleagues mirror your pacing. They don't name it, but they feel it. You've become the lighthouse. Steady even when waves crash. Finally, stand at the doorway. Each time you shift from vigilance to coherence, you prove trust is more than an idea. It's a body state, and when your body carries trust, the field responds differently. Opportunities seem smoother. Timing aligns. Conversations resolve faster. You didn't conjure miracles, you tuned your instrument. Coherence is the first trust signal the quantum field can actually read. Without it, everything else is noise. With it, you become a clear transmitter of possibilities waiting to land. You already know what overthinking feels like. It's the loop of scenarios that never settles. A dozen what-ifs lined up like dominoes, each one knocking the next. Overthinking promises safety but delivers exhaustion. That loop is a closed system. It circles the same ground without new data. Here's the pivot you've been sensing. Insight doesn't live in the loop. It arrives sideways, from outside the system. It's not conjured by effort, but received through openness. This is the beginning of what we'll call quantum cognition thinking, that doesn't grind forward in straight lines, but arrives fully formed, as if downloaded, from the inside out. Quantum cognition thrives on 3 moves: receive, reality check, release. First, you receive the idea without pushing. It might come as a phrase, an image, a pull toward action. Second, you reality check it lightly. Does it feel coherent in the body? Does it align with known facts? Third, you release it, act if it holds. Let it go if it doesn't. Now widen the lens. Think of your mind like an antenna. When jammed with static, it struggles to pick up anything clear. But when tuned with trust, signals arrive intact. You've had this before, waking with an answer you didn't think through, or blurting out a solution mid-conversation that surprises even you. That's quantum cognition in motion. Let's test it in the small. Tomorrow, instead of wrestling a decision, try this triad. Pause, breathe once, and say inwardly, receive. Let the first impression land. Then whisper, check. Feel if the body tightens or steadies. Then whisper, release. If it steadies, take one small step. If not, let it dissolve without chasing. Here's what shifts when you practice: your mind stops hoarding. Instead of spinning 10 scenarios, it trusts timing intelligence to deliver one clear nudge at the right moment. You reduce friction. You free energy that was locked in endless rehearsal. From the inside out, quantum cognition also shows up as unusual clarity. A sentence you write feels more precise than usual. A conversation flows without rehearsed lines. You solve in minutes what used to take hours of charts and plans. The key is not trying to replicate the state, it's letting it reappear when the field is quiet. Translate this into choices. Keep a small download log. Each time a thought arrives fully formed, jot it down without editing. Over time, you'll notice a pattern. The best ideas come when you weren't trying, walking, showering, staring at clouds. This teaches you to trust the receiver, not just the analyzer. When the field includes others, quantum cognition often arrives through them. Someone blurts the exact phrase you needed. A child's offhand comment answers a week-long dilemma. A stranger's remark on the train sparks a solution. The field doesn't care about your ego. It delivers through whatever channel is open. Now widen the lens again. Conventional problem-solving insists on grinding the gears. Quantum cognition demonstrates that collaboration with the field is faster and often more elegant. This doesn't erase logic. It supplements it with non-linear data streams your conscious mind alone could never generate. Finally, stand at the doorway. Overthinking will still try to reclaim territory. That's fine. You'll notice the tension. Then apply the triad. Receive, check, release, repeat. Slowly, loops collapse into signals. Signals guide you forward without wasted steps. This is how choices shift when trust meets thought. You stop treating your mind like a factory and start treating it like an antenna. You don't abandon reason, you expand it to include resonance. And that resonance points you toward paths your linear logic would have missed entirely. Look around your space. The pile of papers, the glowing screen, the phone that buzzes even when you told it not to. Your environment is not neutral. It's a mirror, amplifying whatever state you bring to it. Coherence makes the room breathe easier. Static makes the walls feel closer. Here's the pivot you've been sensing. You don't have to fight your environment. You can tune it. Just as a musician adjusts strings before a concert, you can arrange space and technology so they reflect clarity rather than chaos. This is not feng shui dogma. It's signal hygiene, from the inside out. Notice how devices act when you're tense. Pages freeze, updates fail, batteries drain too fast. It feels like bad luck, but it's resonance, your static meeting theirs. Then notice what happens when you soften. The same laptop runs smoother. The same phone glitch resolves after you breathe. Coincidence? Maybe, but test it long enough and you'll see a pattern. Now widen the lens. Environments and machines are like echo chambers. They pick up your signal and amplify it back. A cluttered desk multiplies mental clutter. A tidy surface multiplies ease. It's not moral judgment, it's feedback loop. Change the loop, and the system stabilizes. Let's test it in the small. Before opening your laptop tomorrow, pause for 30 seconds. Place your hands on the keyboard without typing. Breathe until your jaw softens. Then begin. Watch how the first 10 minutes unfold. Often the tech feels more cooperative, not because it magically changed, but because you did. Translate this into choices. Build micro-reset rituals. Light a candle before a writing session. Put one plant near your desk. Set your phone to grayscale for 2 hours. Each small shift recalibrates the feedback loop between your state and your tools. From the inside out. Remember, you don't need a minimalist shrine, you need alignment. For some, a few sacred objects keep coherence alive. For others, emptiness is better. The point isn't aesthetic, it's resonance. Does your space broadcast static or signal? When the field includes others, your environment becomes an invitation. A calm room draws calm behavior. A chaotic setup invites distraction. Ever noticed how people lower their voices in a library without being asked? That's environmental coherence guiding the collective. You can create that field wherever you are. Now widen the lens again. Technology is not the enemy, it's an amplifier. If you treat it as a servant rather than a master, it mirrors that role. Set boundaries, no screens in the first 10 minutes after waking, or one unplugged meal a day. These aren't rules for discipline, they're ways of keeping tech tuned to your signal. not the other way around. Finally, stand at the doorway. Environments and devices will always reflect your inner stance. You don't have to control every variable. You only need to anchor coherence and let the room, the tools, the systems respond. Over time, you'll notice fewer glitches, smoother flows, and an odd sense that your spaces themselves support your trust. This is how the invisible becomes visible. Coherence isn't just in your breath. It's in the chair you sit on, the screen you touch, the air you breathe. When you treat environment and tech as mirrors, you stop blaming them for static and start tuning them for signal. And in that tuning, weird becomes natural spaces and machines working with you instead of against you. You've felt it before. A child stares at you with wide eyes, not because of what you said, but because of what you carried. A dog wanders across the park to sit by your feet. A room of tense people shifts the moment you walk in, and no one can explain why. These are not accidents. They're feedback. They show how your coherence ripples into others. Here's the pivot you've been sensing. Relationships aren't just conversations. They're energy exchanges. Words matter, but tone, breath, posture, and nervous system coherence broadcast louder. When you're aligned, others unconsciously align. When you're static, others unconsciously brace. You can't fake it. The field always tells the truth. From the inside out. Notice how animals and children respond. They are honest barometers. They don't analyze your story, they read your frequency. If your trust is steady, they lean in. If your body hums with vigilance, they step back. This is feedback, not judgment. It shows you where coherence really lives. Let's test it in the small. Next time you speak to someone, pay less attention to the words and more to your breath. Slow it by 1 beat. Drop your shoulders a fraction. Watch how they soften in response. You didn't convince them, you invited them into a field where trust was already present. Now widen the lens. Think about group dynamics. A meeting that begins in chaos often settles when one person refuses to accelerate. Their stillness acts like gravity. The group orbits around it. This isn't mystical, it's physiology. Nervous systems sync. Breath entrains. Coherence scales. Translate this into choices. You don't need to perform calmness. You need to cultivate real coherence and let it broadcast silently. Use simple language when conflict rises. Instead of long defenses, offer short truths. Instead of layered explanations, share one grounded sentence. Less static, more signal. From the inside out, remember that trust doesn't make you invulnerable. You will still feel others' chaos. The key is not absorbing it as your own. Picture yourself as a tuning fork. If another fork hums with dissonance, you don't need to match it. You can hold pitch until they remember theirs. Here's the secret: relational coherence is not about control, it's about permission. You give others permission to drop their guard by modeling it. You don't demand trust, you embody it. And because coherence is contagious, others will often choose it without even knowing why. When the field includes strangers, this becomes most obvious. The cashier smiles longer. The person next to you on the train starts talking about something real instead of weather. These micro moments prove the field doesn't stop at your skin, it ripples outward. Finally, stand at the doorway. Relationships become less about managing impressions and more about curating coherence. You don't need to be the loudest voice in the room. You only need to hold the most stable signal. The room will find you. This is how trust becomes social architecture. It builds invisible bridges, lowers conflict, and multiplies cooperation. You stop working so hard to persuade and start letting the field itself carry the message. And in that field, connection feels less like effort and more like gravity, natural, inevitable, quietly transformative. Every delay, every closed door, every plan that unraveled, you've probably cursed them at first. You called them setbacks, misfortune, even punishment. But what if they were training? What if every obstacle wasn't rejection, but a carefully weighted exercise designed to build your trust muscles? Here's the pivot you've been sensing. The field doesn't waste resistance. It uses it. Just like a gym adds weight to grow strength, life adds friction to grow coherence. Without resistance, trust would stay fragile, untested. With resistance, it hardens into something cellular, something you can stand on when storms come. From the inside out, consider the delays you've lived through, the call that didn't come when you wanted it, the job that slipped away, the relationship that ended too soon. In those gaps, you had two choices: collapse into doubt or practice surrender. Each time you practiced, your nervous system learned that trust can hold even when outcomes vanish. Let's test it in the small. Think of one current obstacle, a bill, a broken plan, an unanswered message. Instead of asking, "Why is this happening to me?" reframe, "What is this training in me?" Notice how the shift changes your body. Shoulders drop, breath deepens, anxiety loses its monopoly. Now widen the lens. Some of the greatest breakthroughs in history came disguised as blocks. A failed experiment that revealed a new principle, a canceled trip that led to the right encounter, an illness that forced stillness, opening space for deeper insight. The pattern is consistent resistance redirects, not just obstructs. Translate this into choices. Build a 3-question filter for obstacles. 1. What is being stripped away? Often it's dependency, illusion, or false security. 2. What capacity is being trained? Patience, surrender, adaptability, courage. 3. What timing might be protected? Maybe the delay keeps you from arriving too early or too unprepared. From the inside out, remember that trust doesn't mean liking obstacles. It means decoding them. When you see resistance as training rather than punishment, you extract value even in difficulty. You stop rehearsing despair and start rehearsing trust. When the field includes others, your response to obstacles ripples. A calm leader in crisis steadies the group. A parent who treats setbacks as lessons teaches children resilience. A friend who frames delays as timing windows invites others to relax. Coherence becomes contagious courage. Here's the secret: obstacles are not tests you can fail. They're invitations you can accept. Even if you resist at first, the moment you shift into trust, the lesson lands. The weight that once felt unbearable becomes the very training that proves your capacity. Finally, stand at the doorway. The next time a door closes, see it as the hinge of a bigger entrance. The next time timing stalls, call it rehearsal space. The next time life adds weight, recognize the gym you've been enrolled in. This is how weird things begin to look natural. You stop reading resistance as rejection and start reading it as orchestration. And in that reframe, trust deepens, muscles grow, coherence strengthens. The very obstacles you once hated become the architecture of your strength. You've been told that big leaps change everything. The massive decision, the grand risk, the bold proclamation. And yes, sometimes they do. But more often, the field listens to smaller signals. Probability doesn't bend in giant strokes alone. It shifts with consistent microacts, the kind so small you'd overlook their power. Here's the pivot you've been sensing. Trust isn't proven in one dramatic gesture. It's sculpted through repeated whispers, the daily choice to lean into coherence, the small action taken without needing proof, the gentle release of over-control. Each microact adjusts the trajectory of outcomes more effectively than rare bursts of intensity. From the inside out, think of probability like wet clay. Push too hard, and it collapses. Touch it lightly, consistently, and the form emerges with elegance. Your microacts are the touches, the way you breathe before you speak, the decision to send a message when nudged, the choice to pause rather than force. Each is a stroke that sculpts the future. Let's test it in the small. Keep a synchronicity log for 1 week. Each time a coincidence lands, numbers repeat. A call arrives at the right moment. An object appears when needed. Note it. Don't analyze, just record. You'll notice something the more you log, the more appear. Why? Because attention itself is a microact. Observation collapses probability into patterns. Translate this into choices. Try a 7-day microact practice. Day 1. Begin each morning with 1 sentence of trust written down. Day 2. Leave 1 intentional gap in your schedule and watch what lands. Day 3. Act on the smallest intuitive nudge within 5 minutes. Day 4. Replace 1 controlling thought with what can work without force. Day 5. Express gratitude for 1 subtle synchronicity. Day 6. Share 1 story of alignment with someone open. Day 7. Reflect on the chain of microacts and their effects. Now widen the lens. Small acts ripple through the morphic field. 1 choice stabilizes you. Your coherence stabilizes others. Their softened reactions ripple outward. A text of encouragement sent in trust may alter someone's day, shifting probabilities far beyond your awareness. From the inside out, watch your body cues as you practice. Microacts should feel light, not heavy. If you feel strain, you've turned them into performance. Trust isn't forced, it's repeated permission, gently offered. Here's the secret: probability prefers ease. When you move with light touches, the field responds more quickly. When you demand fireworks, you create static. Microacts let you signal trust without pressure, which clears the channel for bigger alignments to arrive naturally. When the field includes others, the effects multiply. Groups that track synchronicities together see them explode in frequency. Families that practice 1 trust ritual notice smoother dynamics. Communities that celebrate small evidence of alignment attract more. The collective clay reshapes itself through shared microacts. Finally, stand at the doorway. Big leaps will still come, but you don't need to wait for them. Each microact is a sculptor's hand, turning possibility into form. Trust grows not from 1 heroic moment, but from hundreds of subtle permissions stacked quietly, day after day. This is how you bend reality without force. You don't smash probabilities into place. You nudge them. You sculpt them. You let the clay reveal shapes that force could never create. Weird becomes normal. Normal becomes miraculous. All through the power of small acts repeated with trust. Strange things happen when you live in coherence. Opportunities open. People are drawn in. Timing aligns with eerie precision. And with that shift comes a temptation to believe you've discovered a secret that makes you special. But coherence isn't a badge. It's a responsibility. Here's the pivot you've been sensing. Power without humility corrodes. The moment you place yourself above others because of what trust has revealed, you slip back into static. The field doesn't honor superiority, it honors service. Alignment isn't meant to create hierarchies. It's meant to stabilize environments, to make trust contagious. From the inside out, recall the times when your presence changed a room. A conflict cooled, a friend felt lighter. A stranger smiled without knowing why. These weren't moments for pride, they were demonstrations that coherence transmits. You were the channel, not the source. Let's test it in the small. Next time something miraculous happens, an impossible solution appearing, a problem dissolving, a need met before you voiced it. Pause before telling the story. Ask, am I sharing this to prove my power or to provide hope? The intent shifts the ripple. One broadcasts ego, the other broadcasts permission. Translate this into choices. Anchor ethics through 3 practices. 1. Transparency. Acknowledge uncertainty when it's real. Trust isn't about pretending you know everything. 2. Boundaries. Say no when others demand proof or energy you cannot authentically give. Coherence requires conservation. 3. Service. Share your stories and practices not as formulas, but as invitations for others to test in their own lives. Now widen the lens. History shows the danger of superiority cloaked in awakening. Gurus who demanded devotion, movements that fractured under ego. The lesson repeats: when alignment is hoarded, it collapses. When it's shared humbly, it scales. From the inside out, remind yourself daily, coherence isn't yours alone. It flows through you, but it belongs to everyone. The tuning fork doesn't own the pitch, it simply vibrates. You're not chosen above others. You're chosen alongside them to model what's possible. When the field includes others, ethics matter more than spectacle. Children notice if your calmness feels authentic or staged. Friends know if your guidance comes with strings attached. Groups sense whether your influence uplifts or manipulates. The field magnifies intent, not just effect. Here's the secret: real power doesn't perform. It stabilizes. The most impactful presence is often the quietest one, the person who anchors trust without needing recognition, the one who serves without demanding loyalty, the one who teaches by living. Finally, stand at the doorway. Every weird synchronicity, every aligned solution, every unexpected flow, it's not proof of superiority. It's proof of possibility. Your role is not to stand taller, but to stand clearer, not to tower above, but to light paths alongside. This is how trust matures. It grows from personal breakthrough into collective service. It shifts from "look what I can do" to "look what's available to all of us." And in that humility, coherence becomes unstoppable because it's no longer about you. It's about the field itself, remembering what it can be. By now, you've seen the patterns. Trust alters time, tunes the body, sculpts probability, steadies relationships. But there's a question hovering: how do you live it fully, not just in glimpses? The answer is practice, not forever. Just one concentrated day, a 24-hour sprint where you let trust lead everything. Here's the pivot you've been sensing. Most people treat trust like a background setting, something to remember occasionally. But when you dedicate one entire day to it, the field responds with clarity too sharp to ignore. Think of it as a laboratory experiment, except you are both scientist and subject. From the inside out, set 3 anchors before you begin. 1 decision, 1 conversation, 1 environment tweak. Choose them in advance and commit to moving through each, not by control, but by surrender. The decision might be as simple as which project to prioritize. The conversation might be a call you've delayed. The environment tweak might be clearing one corner of clutter. Let's test it in the small. On the morning of your sprint, pause before you rise. Place your hand on your chest and say inwardly, "I release outcomes today. I collaborate with trust." Then carry that declaration into the first anchor. Notice how the decision feels when guided by coherence rather than fear. Translate this into choices. Keep a log through the day. Each time you feel tension, Write down the micro-act you used to return one breath, one reframe, one pause. At night, review the log. You'll see proof delays that aligned, words that landed, chances that opened. These become receipts of what 24 hours of surrender can generate. Now widen the lens. The sprint isn't about controlling miracles. It's about training recognition. You'll notice timing windows you normally bulldoze through. You'll feel how obstacles turn softer when met with trust. You'll catch glimpses of quantum cognition landing faster. The field will demonstrate, because you gave it one full day of clear channel. From the inside out, remember that this isn't about perfection. You will still tighten, still doubt, still overthink. The practice is catching it sooner, shifting back quicker. Each rebound proves trust is becoming a reflex, not just a concept. When the field includes others, the 24-hour sprint often multiplies. A friend calls at the right time. A stranger says exactly what you needed. A group setting becomes lighter. People may even comment that something feels different around you without knowing why. That's coherence, broadcasting louder because you held the channel steady for a full day. Here's the secret: you don't need to live this way non-stop. Just repeat the sprint once a week, or whenever doubt feels loudest. Each round strengthens the muscle. Over time, surrender stops feeling like an experiment and starts feeling like home. Finally, stand at the doorway one day. That's all it takes to remember what trust really does. You step into the lab of your life, surrender the illusion of control, and watch reality reorganize itself around your coherence. After 24 hours, you'll know the weird is just the natural, revealed by trust. This is how your practice culminates. 10 sections, one arc from static to signal, from vigilance to coherence, from control to surrender. You've trained perception, tuned body, sculpted probability, steadied ethics, and tested trust in action. Now you carry it forward not as theory, but as lived evidence. Slow down here. You've traveled far in this exploration through trust, time, body, mind, relationships, obstacles, and choices. Each section opened a doorway, but the purpose was never to overwhelm you with ideas. The purpose was to leave you with one simple rhythm. Trust is not abstract. It's embodied. Breathe with that. Notice your shoulders soften as if your body itself approves of the reminder. You don't have to master everything at once. You don't have to prove anything to anyone. You've already practiced trust simply by listening, by letting these words land instead of rushing on. From the inside out, feel how coherence hums differently when you let go of urgency. The nervous system drops its guard. Thoughts stop sprinting. Space opens. And in that space, timing and solutions can arrive without being forced. That's the essence of everything we've been circling when you surrender control. Life collaborates. Let this be gentle. You don't need to track every synchronicity or sculpt probability with precision. Begin with micro-acts: one breath before speaking, one pause before deciding, one release before judging a delay as failure. These small practices ripple far beyond what you can measure. Now widen the lens. Imagine thousands of others doing the same breathing before reacting, softening before forcing. The collective field would shift. Fewer conflicts. More cooperation, a world less driven by vigilance and more guided by coherence. Your individual practice contributes to that shift. Whether you see the ripples or not, you don't need to make promises here. Just notice what resonates, what lingers. Maybe it's the image of time as a braided river. Maybe it's the memory of a child or animal reading your field. Maybe it's the sense that obstacles are weights, not punishments. Whatever it is, let it stay with you as a simple reminder: trust is not rare. It's repeatable. If this message has served you, share it only if it feels aligned. Sometimes silence is the best broadcast. Sometimes a story is. You'll know. And if you feel moved, anchor the journey with one word, trust written, spoken, or silently carried. That word is enough. As you close this session, feel the quiet gift. You're not alone, not unsupported. The field is already responding. It always was.